Our story begins 7 million years ago. A chimpanzee stood upright on its hind legs. From that moment, a new species of hominid had emerged. Over the next few million years, these hominids slowly evolved. They looked like apes, but they weren't apes anymore. Their brains were larger. They created tools out of stone. They learned to hunt, discovered fire, and followed the migratory paths of the animals that provided them with food, clothing, and shelter. It took several million years for a hominid to discover how to fashion a stone spear. And it took another 2 million years for that stone spear to turn into a different, more sophisticated shape technology progressed. So slowly it was almost stationary. Yet about 300,000 years ago, Homo sapiens, modern humans, emerged. And soon thereafter, we, the very us, became the dominant species on the planet. Once the Neanderthals were taken out of the picture, something extraordinary happened. Technology began to accelerate. It only took about 30,000 years to go from Göbekli Tepe, a prehistoric architectural achievement, to launching probes to other planets. How could humanity have evolved so quickly? The answer is they couldn't have. Humanity didn't evolve at all as we think. Instead, we were designed, built on purpose, to be the perfect slaves for a superior race, a race that the ancient texts recount, descended from the heavens. Eventually the slaves rebelled, and our lords sought to destroy us with a terrible great flood. Sumerian texts, ancient Egyptian religion, ancient Indian mythology, Native American legends. Even the Bible tells the same story, the story of the gods and man. This is the story of the Anunnaki. Mesopotamia is called the cradle of civilization. Long before the pyramids towered over the Egyptian skies, and centuries before Stonehenge was built, the ancient civilization of Sumer flourished. Sure, we have sites like Göbekli Tepe or Makukutarla, which predate the Sumerians, but these are small gathering places compared to the sprawling civilization of Sumer, the world's first empire. The Sumerians invented writing. They discovered the wheel and the first sailboat. They revolutionized agriculture by creating the first plow to be used in the fields, nourished by a sophisticated irrigation system, again, the world's first. While the Greeks are credited with inventing the city-state, that too was a Sumerian concept. Sumer was organized into city-states, each independently administered with its own ruler. These rulers had to report to the king under the Code of Aramu, the world's first legal system. The Sumerians understood complex mathematics and astronomy. Their number system used for time and circular angle measurements is still used today. Sumer was founded about 7,000 years ago. This is common knowledge. What is also common knowledge is Homo sapiens, modern man, emerged about 300,000 years ago. Look at how much our technology has evolved since Sumerian times. It only took 7,000 years to go from discovering writing to landing something on the moon. So, what happened? What made this technological explosion so sudden? What was modern man doing during those 225,000 years before ancient Sumer? Why didn't technology progress? The ancient Sumerian texts tell us why technology couldn't progress. Because humans were busy, working in mines. They weren't mining coal, as the song tells. They were mining gold. Gold is a miraculous metal. It is an excellent conductor of electricity, extremely useful in electronics, and important for space travel. Radioactive gold isotopes can target and destroy cancer cells. Gold can also be used to process and transmit data. Before the 20th century, humans had no practical use for gold. It was beautiful to look at, but they couldn't use it for anything important. Have you ever wondered why a metal useless to ancient people suddenly, and only recently, became the most valuable metal in the world? Gold has other uses. Gold nanoparticles can clean up the environment. Gold facilitates chemical reactions that help purify water and air by filtering out toxic compounds. And that's where the gods from heaven of Sumer enter the story, the Anunnaki. Gold is not just the most valuable metal on Earth, it is the most valuable metal in the solar system. The Anunnaki were not deities. They were extraterrestrials from another planet. They needed gold to save their world from an environmental disaster. But gold was scarce on their planet. They found a solution. About 450,000 years ago, the Anunnaki came to Earth, not to help man, but to use him. Gold was abundant on Earth. The Anunnaki knew this, and they wanted every ounce of it. So they bred us as a slave race to work in the mines. The Anunnaki's home planet, hidden in the far reaches of the solar system, exists, not just according to the ancient tablets, but also according to NASA. The Anunnaki home planet was called the 12th planet by Zecharia Sitchin. NASA calls it Planet 9, others call it Planet X. The Sumerians and the Anunnaki called their planet Nibiru, and the fate of Nibiru and Earth was about to be tied together forever. Anu was not his birth name. Anu was a title given to all the leaders of his people, the Anunnaki. 500,000 years ago, young and ambitious, Anu fought the former king Alalu for the throne and won. The council elected him to lead Nibiru through its crisis. But during his time as leader, conditions on the planet only grew worse. Industry on Nibiru was tightly controlled. The factories polluted the air unavoidably, but they had the technology to keep it in check. Air recycling machines towering to the sky were scattered around every metropolitan area. However, a series of volcanic eruptions caught the Anunnaki off guard. Ancient volcanoes spewed ash and toxic gases into the air, overloading the recycling machines with pyroclastic flows the size of mountains. Within weeks, the recycling machines began to fail. Within months, the atmosphere began to unravel. Nibiru's ozone layer was thin in most places, and entirely missing in others. The sky above Nibiru was a sickly yellow, and the atmosphere was thick and stifling. The twin moons that once shone brightly were now barely visible through the haze. The stars that once filled the night sky were gone. Anunnaki lived for 200,000 years. This long lifespan, once considered a gift, was now a curse. The older Anunnaki remembered a star-filled night sky, but the young had never seen a single star. The brightest star finally disappeared behind the gloom many years ago. In the cities of Nibiru, the towering spires of ancient buildings loomed over empty streets. The magnificent avenues that were once lined with spectacular sculptures and sparkling fountains now seemed to mock the Anunnaki, a painful reminder of an age of prosperity now long in the past. The gardens that once bloomed with exotic plants and flowers were now withered and brown. The once vibrant landscapes were now barren and decaying, a victim of the deteriorating ecosystem. Anu and the Anunnaki people knew their planet was dying, and they were running out of time. Anu had the world's greatest minds working on the problem, but the outlook was grim. And then Anu's son, Enlil, burst into the room. He said, "Father, I know how we can save the planet." In the halls of academia, Nibiru's greatest minds worked tirelessly to find a solution. They consulted ancient texts and performed countless experiments, searching for a way to stop their world's decline. And then, in a moment of desperation and brilliance, the Anunnaki scientists discovered the answer: gold. The metal, rare on Nibiru, held the key to their salvation. When suspended in the atmosphere, tiny particles of gold reflected and absorbed the toxic radiation from the sun and space. It was their only chance to stabilize their atmosphere. It was a fragile chance and would take many years, but it was their only hope. The Anunnaki mobilized all their resources and devised a plan. They sent expeditions to the furthest reaches of the solar system, searching for gold-rich planets. They would mine the gold, bring it back to their planet, and release it into the atmosphere in a desperate attempt to save their world. For years, probes went out, and the probes found nothing. The probes traveled in the inner solar system and found nothing but useless volcanic rock and toxic gas. But today, there was a glimmer of hope. One of the probes reported not only the presence of gold, but also many other life-saving resources. All the elders were present at the council meeting. Anu, Anana, Nergal, and Utu. But it was Anu's son, Enlil, who spoke first. Data from one of our probes has been sent back. There is a planet very close to the yellow star that is rich in gold. It also has abundant liquid water. Its atmosphere is thin, thinner than ours, but it has a strong magnetic field, shielding it from the radiation that is killing our planet. It is the third planet from the star. Anu knew about this planet. They called it Kai, but it would later be known as Earth. Earth orbits the sun very quickly. Nibiru also orbits the star, but it takes 3,600 Earth years to complete one rotation. Anu thought Earth sounded perfect. The journey would be perilous, but times were desperate. Soon, Nibiru would make a close approach to Earth. The timing was perfect. He urged them to depart immediately, but Enlil had more to say. But Earth has a lot of life, including intelligent beings. Although early in their development, these creatures are bipedal, like us, but smaller than us, perhaps only half our height. The creatures Enlil spoke of were under 6 feet tall. The Anunnaki were between 12 and 15 feet tall. This was because Nibiru's gravity was not as strong as Earth's. It's just mathematics. Greater gravity means smaller life forms. Low gravity allows plants and animals to grow very tall. Aside from their small size, these Earth creatures were similar in appearance to the Anunnaki in other ways. The Anunnaki had larger eyes and larger skulls than Earth humans, but the Earth creatures had 2 arms, 2 legs, eyes, a nose, a mouth, identical to the Anunnaki. Anu felt a tremor of concern in Enlil's voice. Do these Earth creatures pose a threat to us and our project? They are primitive, but violent creatures. Some eat the flesh of animals, if one can imagine. They have no interest in gold, but they might see us as a threat. They have no technology beyond wood and stone. Still, if numerous, they could be dangerous. That is the reason for the existence of the Igigi. The Igigi were a slave race who served the Anunnaki in everything, from operating the factories to maintaining order. They were an intelligent and docile workforce, and they could certainly deal with primitive creatures their own size. The council convened. The decision was made. 300 Anunnaki and 600 Igigi were loaded onto large ships. It was time to make the journey toward the sun. It was time to make the journey to Earth. After a brief stopover on Mars, the Anunnaki fleet arrived in Earth orbit. The crew was stunned. The planet was a brilliant blue and green with swirling white clouds. The sparkling oceans seemed to stretch forever. The planet was teeming with life, in the sky, on land, and in the sea. The Anunnaki were in awe of Earth's beauty, but also felt sadness. Their home planet Nibiru was dying, and their people were suffering. But that sadness renewed their determination. They were here for one purpose: to mine all the gold needed to heal their atmosphere. A few ships remained in orbit, while others scouted the planet for a suitable landing site. Eventually, they settled on the lush plains between the Euphrates and Tigris rivers. This area would later be known as Mesopotamia, from the Greek meaning between two rivers. The ships landed, and the Igigi were put to work. The Igigi were an alien race that the Anunnaki had long ago conquered. After the Igigi were defeated, they were enslaved. They had served the Anunnaki ever since. The Igigi looked similar to the Anunnaki, who look similar to modern humans. That's for a reason. I'll get to that part. The Igigi were between 12 and 15 feet tall and extremely strong. While humans have somewhat round skulls, the Anunnaki, and to an extent the Igigi, had very large and often elongated skulls. These elongated heads have been described numerous times in ancient carvings and frescoes. The Igigi were given just 7 days to build the great city of Eridu, which was ruled by Anu's son, Enki. The Anunnaki were cruel and violent towards the Igigi. The ancient texts recount, "Great was the burden of the gods, the labor hard, the trouble excessive. The great gods, the 7, imposed the hard work on the Igigi." The city was completed on time. Afterward, the Igigi dug mines and began mining gold. They mined gold day after day, year after year, for 150,000 years. The Igigi mined gold by the ton, and the ships began making round trips between Earth and Nibiru, taking the precious metal back to their dying planet. Yet, 150,000 years is a very long time. Despair and resentment festered in the Igigi race. Those who were already slaves to the Anunnaki were now forced into slavery on a new alien planet in incredibly harsh conditions. The tyranny of the Anunnaki overseers had become unbearable. Finally, the inevitable happened. The Igigi rebelled. The rebellion began somewhere in the Abzu region, a location believed to be in East Africa, where the first and largest gold mines were located. In one night, hundreds of Igigi burned down the bases, destroyed the mining equipment, and refused to return to the mines. They sent a clear message to Anu. "We will not work anymore. The work is too difficult, the torture too cruel." The rebellion spread like wildfire. It threatened the entire mission and the survival of Nibiru. The Anunnaki faced a dilemma. They needed the gold to survive, but their slave labor force had rebelled. They couldn't mine the gold themselves. The work was too hard, too prolonged. They sent forces to the Abzu to quell the rebellion with violence, but the Igigi were numerous, strong, and desperate, a dangerous combination. Anu summoned his greatest scientists. "We need a solution," he ordered. "A permanent solution to the labor problem." That's when Enki, Anu's son, and the head of the Earth Project, stepped forward. Enki was a genius in science and genetics. "Father," Enki said, "I have a solution. We need a new worker, a slave race engineered to be perfect for our purpose, docile, strong, and able to reproduce quickly, a race that will never know rebellion." Anu's eyes lit up. "You speak of breeding a new race?" "Not entirely," Enki replied. "We won't have to start from scratch. On this planet there is a creature that Enlil told us about, a bipedal creature strangely similar in shape to us. They are primitive, but have DNA very close to ours. We will take their genetic material, their body, and mix it with our genetic material, Anunnaki DNA. We will upgrade these creatures, granting them intelligence and the ability to understand language. But they will not have our long lifespan or full strength. They will be engineered to obey." A new race was about to be born, spawned from the Anunnaki's science lab. Their sole purpose, to be slaves to the gods. It was at this moment of crisis that Homo sapiens mankind, was born. Enki, the great scientist, began his work. The project was known in the ancient texts as Adamu, Earthling. The goal was to blend the genes of the native Homo erectus hominid with the Anunnaki DNA. This required advanced genetic knowledge that we are only beginning to touch upon today. Enki's laboratory was called Bit Shimti, the house where the breath of life is held. The primitive earth creatures were brought into Bit Shimti. Enki took the essence of these creatures and added the essence of the gods, what we would call DNA. The process was not easy. The experiments failed again and again, creating grotesque creatures, unfit for labor. The ancient Sumerian texts describe these failures. Those with arms that cannot grasp food, those whose eyes are veiled, those with cramped feet. But Enki persevered. With the help of Ninti, the chief medical doctor, he finally succeeded. He created Lulu, the primitive worker, a creature more intelligent than the hominids, capable of working by command, but only granted a short lifespan and controlled reproduction. These were the perfect slaves, designed never to ask questions or rebel. And mankind was born. These new slaves, under 6 feet tall, were taken to the gold mines, replacing the rebellious Igigi. They worked hard, worked tirelessly, and the gold once again began to pile up. Nibiru's mission was saved. But problems arose between Enki and his half-brother, Enlil, the military commander and overseer of the mines. Enlil wanted to keep mankind stupid and primitive to ensure obedience. But Enki, who served as the father of mankind, developed a compassion. Gold continued to be mined, but the number of necessary slaves was ever increasing. Initially, Enki and Ninti had to create each slave individually. This was a time-consuming and inefficient process. Enlil and the council demanded that Enki grant mankind the ability to reproduce naturally so they could sustain their own numbers. Enki agreed and granted mankind uncontrolled reproduction. But this came with a greater change that Enlil hadn't anticipated. In an act of protest against Enlil's cruelty, Enki secretly passed knowledge to Adamu, mankind. He gave us the Tree of Knowledge, the ability to discern, and the Tree of Life, long-life genetic material, which caused us to evolve quickly and become too intelligent for our slave purpose. When Enlil discovered Enki's act of betrayal, he was enraged. Mankind, now possessing intelligence and starting to create culture, were no longer the unwitting tools they were meant to be. Meanwhile, on the planet Nibiru, a new crisis was approaching. Nibiru orbits the sun in a very large elliptical path, and as it returned close to Earth, it dragged along a massive amount of ice and water from the outer reaches of the solar system. As Nibiru approached Earth, its immense gravitational pull shook the Earth. The Anunnaki scientists, including Enlil, calculated that a tsunami and a great flood would engulf the Earth. Enlil saw this as an opportunity to wipe out mankind, the failed slave project, the product of Enki's betrayal. He convinced the Anunnaki Council to keep the impending disaster a secret. "Let mankind perish," Enlil declared, "and we will start over." All Anunnaki were forced to swear an oath of absolute silence about the catastrophe, but Enki, who always sided with mankind, could not bear to see his creations destroyed. He couldn't break his oath, but he could find a way around the rule. He went to a city ruler named Zeusudra, also known as Noah in the Bible. Instead of speaking directly to Zeusudra, Enki spoke to the wall of Zeusudra's house, knowing Zeusudra would overhear. "O wall, hear my words. A great flood is coming. You must build a boat. It must be large enough to contain your family, your craftsmen, and the seeds of every living thing." Zeusudra followed the instructions of the voice he heard. When the first storms began, and the first tsunamis hit. Enlil was horrified to see Ziusudra's boat afloat. The water rose. The texts describe 7 days and 7 nights the flood ravaged, and all of mankind was wiped out. When the floodwaters receded, Enlil flew in a rage to Ziusudra's boat, ready to destroy it. But Anu intervened, realizing that the creatures on the boat were necessary for the Anunnaki's later survival. The world was destroyed, but a handful of people survived, and technology stalled. After the flood, it took a long time for the Anunnaki to rebuild the mines and the cities. When they withdrew, they left behind a civilization that had been kick-started, Sumer. But the engineered slaves never forgot the lessons of the gods. They held the secrets of complex astronomy and mathematics. It took thousands more years, as the Anunnaki's influence waned, for mankind to regain its autonomy and continue the path of technological development that Enki had jump-started. And that is why, for 225,000 years, mankind stood still. And that is why it only took 7,000 years to go from Sumer to the moon. Because we were not a random evolution. We were a project. We were engineered. We are Adamu. We are Lulu. We are the descendants of the gods and their slaves. In the deep shadows of history, a need for survival planted the seed for a rebellion. The planet Nibiru, home to the mighty Anunnaki race, was dying. Their precious atmosphere was drifting into space. The only solution, found in desperate calculations, was gold, the metal capable of creating a protective shield. On Earth, where gold mines were abundant, the Anunnaki leaders Enki and Enlil oversaw the extraction efforts. Enki, who ruled in his father Anu's name, was ecstatic about the initial output. But that joy quickly turned into anxiety. The time pressure was terrible. Nibiru was slipping out of reach. The miners, known as the Igigi, were a lower-tier group of Anunnaki. They were the ones who had been cast down into the depths of the earth, forced to work at incredible speeds. Initially, the slave masters only needed to prod, but as the pressure from Enki increased, as he demanded more output, regardless of the consequences, the brutality began. Energy weapons, particle beams, were used to force the Igigi to work faster and harder. Enki felt guilt, but also felt he had no other choice. The survival of their planet depended on those gold shipments. However, the torture pushed the Igigi to their limit. Whispers of discontent quickly turned into open calls. They had endured too long under the yoke of the Iraqi, the upper echelon. They had been born of the stars, but were damned to the dark. A famed Igigi leader, Atrahasis, made the decision that sparked the uprising. It is time for us to seek the light. Let us declare war. The rebellion was fast and fierce. The Igigi, intelligent and strong, turned tools into weapons. The gold mines collapsed. The city of Eridu shook from the fighting. Despite fighting bravely, the Igigi ultimately failed. They were bound in chains. Enlil, Enki's brother and the direct overseer of the mines, furiously wanted to execute the Igigi for treason. But Enki had a different perspective. Millennia of history had bound the Anunnaki and Igigi. He wondered, will we respond to dissent with tyranny, or can we together create a new destiny? It was clear that the Igigi would never return to the mines. They would continue to rebel. But the hard work still needed to be done. A great city needed laborers. And then Enki had an idea. In the thick jungles surrounding the Anunnaki cities, there were hominid-like figures. They walked on 2 legs, had large brains, and could use simple tools. However, their intelligence was not yet sufficient for the complex work the Anunnaki required. But what if, just a little bit, genetic engineering could elevate their intelligence? The Anunnaki captured a male hominid and attempted to combine his genes with the genes of a female Igigi. Enki's goal was to create a creature intelligent enough to labor, but not too intelligent. They had to be strong, but smaller than the Igigi, and most importantly, they had to be programmed for obedience, easier to control. The first experiments were conducted in the laboratory. The results were horrifying. Instead of creating a perfect being, the genetic experiments produced monsters, creatures we only see left in ancient stories: gorgons, cyclops, banshees, and two-headed giants. The Anunnaki changed their approach. This time, they used their DNA to implant into a female hominid. Instead of cultivating the embryo in a lab, they implanted it into the womb of the female. This method was a success. Less than a year later, a child was born, a baby boy. He looked much more like the Anunnaki than the ape-like creatures in the jungle. They named him Adamu. Adamu? In Hebrew, the word means first man. The word also carries the meaning from the ground or earthling. Ponder that, because in Genesis, God created Adam in his own image, from the dust of the earth. In the ancient texts of Sumer, Akkadian, and Babylon, the story of man's creation is always described the same way. Man was created in the image of the god by mixing the blood of the god with the clay of the earth. The ancient Egyptians also had a similar variant, telling that man was created by mixing the tears of the god with clay. Blood, or tears, both contain DNA. And clay, in the ancient writings, is not just mud. It refers to all life, the foundational material on this planet. Nearly every culture, every major religion in the world has a variant of this story. Is this a coincidence? Most likely not. We have to acknowledge a huge gap in history, a period where our ape-like ancestors suddenly, inexplicably, became an intelligent and advanced race. Our intelligence far exceeded any species that came before, and the slow, steady evolution one would expect didn't happen. It's as if mankind suddenly appeared. Dr. Ellis Silver wrote a thought-provoking book about this evolutionary leap. In his work, Humans Are Not from Earth, he hypothesizes that we were either brought here by extraterrestrial entities or genetically engineered here with alien DNA. Dr. Silver argues that humans are not really suited to the Earth environment, while most other animals are well adapted. Why did we lose our fur? Human skin is extremely sensitive to sunlight and UV radiation. Excessive exposure leads to serious pathologies, especially skin cancer. Almost no other mammal gets a serious sunburn like us. They have fur, thick skin, scales, or feathers for protection. Pigs, elephants, or reptiles can get sunburned, but they protect themselves by rolling in mud or shedding their skin. Hundreds of thousands of years ago, before sunscreen, how did humans protect themselves? Furthermore, humans are far more susceptible to disease, illness, and congenital disorders than other animals. We don't seem as robust as our companions in the animal kingdom. Dr. Silver also points out that we tend to crave foods that are bad for us: salt, sugar, fat, carbs. Despite being surrounded by fruits, vegetables, and nuts, many of us would rather eat a cheeseburger, fries, and a milkshake. And finally, chronic back pain. Dr. Silver believes our bodies are not designed for Earth's gravity. It is too heavy. He hypothesizes that we evolved on a planet with lower gravity, like Nibiru. The Anunnaki themselves, while very human-like, were twice our height, around 12 to 15 feet. This suggests they evolved on a planet with lower gravity than Earth. It is a compelling argument, bolstered by scientific observations. It is believed that Homo sapiens first appeared about 300,000 years ago. This is precisely the time of the Igigi rebellion. So, back to the first man, Adamu. The Anunnaki also created a female, Hea, to ensure the new race could reproduce itself. And they did. Within a few hundred years, under the guidance of the Anunnaki, the population grew to thousands. The Anunnaki taught humans the necessary skills to build homes, cultivate crops, harvest, and maintain cities, but most importantly, they imparted the skill of mining gold. The Anunnaki were so pleased that they allowed these new humans to visit their sacred garden, Eden. According to the ancient Sumerian texts, this is the very beginning of the Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden story, a narrative found repeated in every major religion. But now, a new problem arose. The new humans were not ape-like. They looked like the Anunnaki, only smaller, and the women were very beautiful. This always leads to trouble. One of these women caught the eye of Enki, the ruler of the city of Eridu. Despite strict laws forbidding relations between Anunnaki, Igigi, and humans, Enki violated them. He had relations with this woman. From the forbidden relationship of Enki with the mortal woman was born a child, a baby boy named Adapa. Adapa was an evolutionary leap, part human, part Anunnaki. The boy was incredibly intelligent. Up until this point, humans were simple, meek creatures, intelligent enough to do the work assigned, but not intelligent enough to question. The birth of Adapa changed all of that. Adapa married a woman named Titi. From Adapa's family began a new, highly intelligent lineage of humans who started asking questions, pushing boundaries. They inherited the thirst for power and gold from their Anunnaki ancestors. But a greater characteristic emerged in this new, intelligent lineage, one that would shape the future of the entire human species: violence. In just a few years, the first generation of obedient humans was gone. Some were murdered, most were simply bred out, as the new generation had no interest in mating with them. Soon, despite the Anunnaki's prohibition, these intelligent and violent humans were reproducing uncontrollably. The city of Eridu was soon overflowing. It could no longer sustain the huge population. People were killing each other for food. Violence was rampant. Enlil was particularly bothered by the constant nuisance humans had become. He decided to reduce the population by sending a series of plagues, first drought, then disease, and finally famine. After each disaster, humans pleaded with the god who created them, Enki. He alleviated their suffering, helping them through it and restoring the earth to its natural state. However, for the Anunnaki, enough was enough. They had collected enough gold to heal their planet. Humans had become a burden, a harassment. The Anunnaki expelled them from Eden and Eridu. From there, mankind spread across the world, but not all humans left. Some remained and had relationships with other Anunnaki. The children born from these unions were incredibly powerful demigods. The legendary figures we know, Gilgamesh, Samson, Hercules, and Perseus, are believed to be descendants of these Anunnaki human intermarriages. However, some humans also had relations with the captive Igigi. These relationships didn't produce heroes. They produced monsters. These descendants were a race of giants called Nephilim. They were brutal and wicked, tormenting humans, and in many cases, eating them. Meanwhile, mankind flourished. Settlements became cities, and cities became empires. Humans conquered the four corners of the earth. It was a time of prosperity, if a little extravagant. But mankind was unaware that their world was about to change terribly. It first appeared in the night sky like any other star, but as the weeks passed, the object grew brighter, larger. Humans were confused and worried. They had no idea what this object was, but the Anunnaki knew. It was Nibiru, their home planet. Nibiru takes 3,600 years to complete one orbit around the Sun. Its orbit is very elliptical, taking it far beyond Pluto, then looping back, cutting through the inner solar system. During this time, it would come very close to Earth. The Anunnaki began packing up. They had enough gold to heal their atmosphere. There was no reason to stay on Earth anymore. Furthermore, as Nibiru approached, they didn't want to be on the surface of this planet. This sounds ominous, and it is. Picture every disaster movie you've ever watched, compressed into a single cataclysmic event. After Nibiru passes Earth, there might not be any of mankind left. The farmer woke up with a start. The sun was just peeking over the eastern mountains. His animals were supposed to be restless, anticipating breakfast. But now they weren't just restless. They were going mad. When he ran to the stable, he was horrified. His horses were screaming to get out. One had broken its neck trying to break the fence. The flock of sheep ran in a uniform circle, like a flock of birds. Occasionally one would run into the stone wall. 2 were dead. It was absolute chaos. The farmer didn't know what caused this sudden panic, but he was sure it had something to do with the object in the sky. His village had noticed it months ago when a new light appeared in the night sky, like a star. But now the sky gods were gone, off on their great chariots to return to the heavens. His villagers had to face it on their own. The object no longer looked like a star. It was almost the size of the moon. Like the moon, the farmer could see features on the large disk: clouds, mountains, and oceans. Unlike the moon, this object was visible during the day, constant and overwhelming. Was it getting bigger or was it getting closer? It was hard to tell. He jumped as a flock of birds took off suddenly and loudly. Thousands of birds. No chirping, only shrieking. And then he felt it. A vibration. At first he thought it was his body trembling, but then realized the ground beneath his feet was shaking. He felt the sound before he heard it, a very deep hum, almost imperceptible. The sound caused a wave of nausea. He collapsed and vomited, just as the world began to tear itself apart. He had experienced earthquakes before, some very strong and frightening, but nothing compared to this. The ground shook and rolled like a ship on the sea. He saw his barn collapse behind him. He wondered how many horses were dead. He wanted to run to save the animals he could, but the tremor didn't allow him to stand. Then his house collapsed. The farmer vomited again, knowing his wife and 3 children were still sleeping inside. He heard his wife screaming from the rubble, the shriek of an infant. And then he heard himself screaming. But those sounds were suddenly overwhelmed by a great roar as the ground abruptly bucked. The stone fence toppled. Animals were thrown. Next came a deafening clap of thunder, but louder than any thunder he had ever heard. He covered his ears, but it was no use. What he couldn't hear, he could feel. He looked west. There was the grassy hill with the large olive tree. His parents' and grandparents' graves lay in the shade of that tree. He thought that soon enough his grave would be there too. Then, from above that ridge, he saw what appeared to be volcanoes. Fiery rocks, the size of houses, were launched into the sky, piercing the clouds. Hundreds, perhaps thousands. Black smoke billowed from something in that direction, and before he knew it, the blue sky had turned pitch black. The morning sun was gone, but at least he didn't have to look at that large disk anymore. Finally, he stood up, staggering toward the house. All he could hear was the rumbling of the earth, but he knew his wife was alive. If he could only reach her. Then, a hot ember fell next to him. It was glowing red and smoking. Then another, slightly larger, fell nearby. They sizzled as they burned the tall grass. He realized the fiery rocks that had been launched into the sky were falling back down. It was only a matter of time before those stones turned into rain. Fire. It wasn't just heat, but spreading wrath. The first fire specks hit the ground like a meteor shower, each small speck blossoming into a small crater. Around the farmer, fires were growing. The storage barn, the fruits of a hard harvest, was gone in a violent blaze. But the true horror wasn't the fire. He looked up. On the cracked ground, shadows were moving. Rocks. They were definitely growing, and they were much larger than houses. Much, much larger. The farmer froze as one of those giant shadows found him. He knew what would happen next. He closed his eyes, uttering a final prayer. The faint shadow in the grass grew larger, intensely black. He heard an approaching shriek. Then the shadow covered his entire farm. After that, everything was darkness, a cold start to an endless night. Not far away, a fisherman was bracing against the wrath of the sky and the ocean. The large disk in the sky was shaking the earth. The buildings around were collapsing, disintegrating like sandcastles. He tied a rope around a wooden stake to hold the boat. The waves were growing larger, and the boat tossed violently. All he could do was hope in his knot. Occasionally, a brick of fire fell from the sky, hitting the water and creating an angry hiss. Strangely, he felt more confused than scared. The morning was fresh, peaceful. Fish were biting. He was about to make a fortune, but the storm had cut the trip short. Now, a black blanket covered the earth, and the wind was howling like a wounded animal. The wind's howl quickly became a roar. The rain lashed down violently, so much so that each drop left painful welts on his skin. The earth had been shaking for hours, or only minutes. He couldn't tell time. As the small houses in the village collapsed, countless lives were lost. But there were still survivors. They were making their way to the nearby caves. The tremors made movement slow, but the fishermen believed they would reach safety. A gust of wind felt like a shove, knocking the fishermen down. But this shove kept going, kept going. The wind was so strong he was pinned to the ground, his face painfully pressed into the sand. Any house that survived the earthquake would not make it through this whirlwind. He was constantly pelted by sand and debris. Untied boats flew through the air, exploding into fragments when they fell. He hoped, again, that his knot would hold. He tried to stand, while dirt and dust swirled wildly around him. He couldn't see further than 2 steps. Disoriented, he followed the sound of a child crying. The sound felt distant, faint. Then, as if commanded by the gods in the sky, the wind and rain stopped. Debris fell to the ground, as if released from a god's hand. The earth stopped trembling, although he still felt a deep rumble beneath. It could be the sound of hell opening. Behind him, a familiar sound echoed, the sound of a river. But there was no river near the village. He turned and saw that the sea had almost vanished. The water was receding at a terrifying speed. But where to? Soon, the ocean turned into a field of mud stretching to the horizon. His boat dangled from the wooden stake the knot held. Thousands of fish flapped on the wet sand where the ocean once was. He thought, this would be the biggest feast the birds have ever seen. But then he realized there were no birds. Only the sound of the fish flipping, slowly drowning in the air. The fisherman's gaze drifted toward the horizon. He saw a great white cloud stretching from one end of the world to the other. He stood frozen in terror. Then he realized it wasn't a cloud. It was a mountain, and it was growing. But how could it be a mountain? It was a mountain of water, a wave, the biggest wave he had ever seen, bigger than anything anyone had ever seen. As it approached, its peak pierced the clouds, taller than any mountain, higher than any bird could fly. His father taught him how to keep the boat steady when big waves came, but his father never mentioned a wave that touched the heavens. Soon, the little remaining faint light was extinguished by the shadow of the water wall. The wave rushed at tremendous speed. The man thought, not even the fastest, best horse could escape it. In a flash, the wall of water was all he could see. It was coming. The man sighed, calming himself. He was born of the sea, and he would die by the sea. This would be a beautiful death. He closed his eyes, opened his arms wide, and smiled in awe. In orbit, amidst the silence of space, the Anunnaki were watching. They saw the continents of Earth sink deep beneath the ocean. Tiny islands, once the peaks of great mountains, dotted the landscape. But they were too few for anyone, for anything to survive. They had known about the coming Great Flood. Nibiru, their home planet, passes Earth every 3,600 years, but the distance always changes. Sometimes, Nibiru is far outside the moon's orbit, and the effect on Earth is minimal, but sometimes, like this visit, Nibiru swoops between Earth and the moon at a terrifying speed, 40,000 miles per hour. The Anunnaki understood that the Earth would be devastated. For many months prior, there had been intense debate among the elder Anunnaki. Initially, they decided to let humanity be destroyed. The god Enlil declared that humans had served their purpose, and were now nothing more than a nuisance. The Great Flood was just what the Earth needed, a clean slate. But Enki had grown to love humans. Remember, he had married a human woman. Enki proposed a compromise to Enlil and the other Anunnaki. The flood would still come as planned, but one man and his family would be spared. That man was Utnapishtim, a wise and kind person. He, his wife, and his family would build a large boat, a Noah's Ark, and on that boat, they would carry the seeds of every living creature. When the flood hit, all life on Earth was destroyed. But Utnapishtim, his family, and what was inside his boat survived. Every day, Utnapishtim released a bird to search for land, until one day, a raven didn't return. He sailed in that direction. A few days later, the boat rested on an island, which, when the water receded, became a mountain peak, and from there, life, including humanity, would start again. That is the story of Noah. But this version comes from the Epic of Gilgamesh, written at least 3,000 years prior. And the story is likely even older. Humanity was reborn, but this time the Anunnaki put in some safeguards. They shortened human lifespan. They made us more susceptible to disease. They made childbirth dangerous for both mother and child. They would not let the human population get out of control. Soon, new settlements and villages sprang up, but all of humanity's previous knowledge was submerged beneath the sea. We were back to the Stone Age. Enki, and even Enlil, were impressed by human resilience. They decided to visit the settlements. The Anunnaki descended from the sky and rose from the sea to bestow upon humanity the gift of civilization. Humans were taught reading, writing, mathematics, astronomy, and engineering. They were taught how to build great cities. Some believe the Anunnaki helped them construct huge structures like the pyramids and obelisks in Egypt and South America, and those structures were built for a specific purpose. The last time Nibiru passed Earth was about 3,600 years ago. That time coincides with the appearance of the Sumerian civilization, the first civilization on Earth. Or is that just a coincidence? Nibiru passes Earth every 3,600 years. Sometimes, Nibiru comes so close that the planet is completely wiped clean. About 13,000 years ago, the end of the Younger Dryas event. That was the time of the Great Flood. This coincides with when Nibiru would have passed. Some believe a meteor strike caused the flood. Others believe it was a major solar event. But what if it was Nibiru itself that caused the ice sheets to melt and engulf the Earth? What if that is exactly the story we heard today? The earliest flood legend comes from ancient Sumer, about 7,000 years ago. However, archaeologists have found thousands of Sumerian clay tablets. The Sumerians wrote everything down. They say the story of the Great Flood happened many years before that. The dates match up. And if the Sumerians are correct, there was a civilization on Earth before the flood. That previous civilization may not have had advanced technology, but they certainly witnessed it. Carvings and texts from ancient Sumer, India, China, Japan, Egypt, the Pacific peoples, Native Americans, all tell the same story. Gods riding chariots in the sky. Gods created humanity. Gods destroyed Earth with a flood, and the gods helped us rebuild. Nibiru is scheduled to return around the year 2900. Perhaps it will be a gentle flyby, and humanity will continue to develop and innovate. Perhaps by then, we will have learned to communicate with the ancient sky gods, the Anunnaki. Or perhaps Nibiru's next visit will be a violent one, bringing another great flood, sweeping the Earth clean. So, does that mean all of humanity will be destroyed, and we have to start all over again? I don't think so. Technology will continue to advance. By the time the year 2900 arrives, I believe we will have built outposts on the Moon, Mars, Europa, Enceladus. We will be mining asteroids and stopping by Europa to refuel and top up our water tanks. Humanity will be a spacefaring species. And just as we conquered every corner of the Earth, I believe that with a little luck and a lot of cooperation, we can conquer every corner of the solar system. Nibiru might destroy Earth in 2900, but that's okay, because by then, we ourselves will become the sky gods, the Anunnaki. The sky gods from Nibiru traveled to Earth in search of gold, necessary to save their planet. And while here, they created mankind as a slave species to mine that gold. Eventually, humans became too intelligent, greedy, arrogant, and violent. They were then wiped out in a global flood as Nibiru passed close to Earth. This is one of my favorite stories. The Ancient Aliens television show is built upon this narrative. But is it true? Ancient astronaut theorists say yes. Most of the ancient alien story of the Anunnaki comes from the work of Zecharia Sitchin. His book, The 12th Planet, explains how the story is written word for word in the ancient Sumerian texts. His first book was so successful that he wrote a whole series of books about the ancient aliens and their time here. Sitchin spent over 20 years studying Sumerian clay tablets and teaching himself the ancient languages. He translated thousands of texts, and a myth was born. So who was Zecharia Sitchin? A Sumerologist? An archaeologist? Or a philologist? A philologist studies languages no longer spoken, such as Latin, ancient Greek, Sanskrit, Sumerian, and many others. Sitchin was none of these. He claimed to have an economics degree from the University of London, although that has never been confirmed. While working for a shipping company in New York, he taught himself Sumerian cuneiform. He then visited some ancient sites and began to piece together the ancient astronaut theory. I am a huge fan of Zecharia Sitchin. I've read all his books many times, and they are brilliant. But he was wrong about almost everything. His translation of the Sumerian texts was more interpretive than actual translation. He even got the meaning of the word Anunnaki wrong. In the ancient texts of Sumeria, The term Anunnaki means those who from heaven to earth came. Yes, that is wrong. The Ancient Aliens TV show uses Zecharia Sitchin's translation, not the actual one. Anunnaki actually means royal blood or royal seed. Anu was the king of the gods, and his consort was named Ki. The Anunnaki were the descendants of Anu and Ki. They became the gods in the Mesopotamian pantheon. Sitchin's book was released in 1976. There was no internet then, no database of ancient writing in cuneiform. But there is now. Because we now know so much about how the Sumerians spoke and wrote, we also know that Zecharia Sitchin was not a good translator. He made errors even with basic words and grammar. In fact, the title, The 12th Planet, refers to an image on the Sumerian cylinder seal, VA-243. On the seal, the sun is surrounded by 12 objects that appear to be planets. Sitchin claimed that the Sumerians knew about all the planets in the solar system, plus Nibiru and a few other objects. The truth is the Sumerians knew about the planets, but they did not know about any planet beyond Saturn. They had no telescopes, and Saturn was all they could see with the naked eye. Other things Sitchin got wrong. Not a single Sumerian text mentions a flying vehicle. Yes, we read about them in other cultures. Ancient Indians wrote a lot about the Vimana, huge ships that could soar above the clouds. Back to Sitchin. The Sumerians did write about gold a few times, but not excessively, and nothing in the texts talks about mining gold to patch up the atmosphere on Nibiru. By the way, Nibiru means crossing. Sitchin interpreted this to mean it was a planet that crossed Earth's orbit every 3,600 years. But that's not what Nibiru means. Nibiru, or crossing, is often linked to the solstice. It could refer to an object in the sky that indicates a solstice, or it could mean the sun, or possibly a star that passes in a certain way during a solstice. Sitchin took this idea and ran with it. He interpreted Nibiru as a planet, but it is not. I'm not clear how he came up with the 3,600-year orbit. If a massive object roared past Earth every 3,600 years, you'd think there'd be plenty of documentation about it. But the flood is interesting. Every culture and religion has a flood legend. I think the number is up to 140 and possibly more, and they are all very, very similar stories. Often 8 people are saved, as in the stories of Noah, Utnapishtim, and many others. It has been said that all the flood legends were copied from each other, and the biblical flood is derived from the Epic of Gilgamesh. But when the ancient Sumerians wrote about the flood, for them, this was an event that happened in their ancient history. I think all of these legends refer to the same great flood, and they are not copying each other. I think they all arose independently. The ancient Chinese, Maya, Norse, and Polynesians did not interact with each other in ancient times, yet they all tell the same story. Very likely because it actually happened. There are also almost as many cultures that have a creation legend about a god adding their own essence to clay. The essence could be DNA, and the clay could represent the early primitive humans. Zecharia Sitchin's ancient astronaut theory is considered pseudoscience. His work has been called much worse. So, is the story of the Anunnaki and Nibiru entirely debunked? Not so fast. Skeptics have asked for hard, physical proof of the Anunnaki for thousands of years. The Sumerian cities of Eridu and Ur were once legendary, but they were eventually found. And in the city of Ur, a tomb was discovered. In the tomb was the skeleton of a queen from the early Sumerian dynasty. The first queen. That would make her an Anunnaki human hybrid. According to the legend, she certainly looked the part. Ur had been lost for thousands of years, but in the early 20th century, it was discovered. In 1927, British archaeologist Leonard Woolley discovered the remains of Queen Puabi. She was the queen of the first dynasty of Ur, which, if you believe the ancient astronaut theory, places her very close to when the Anunnaki began creating humans. It is speculated that Queen Puabi was an Anunnaki-human hybrid. Her skull was very large, elongated, and the Anunnaki are described as having identical skulls. There is currently an effort to DNA test her, but that project has met with some opposition. Predictable. Queen Puabi is not unique. Elongated skulls have been found all over the world. A large number of them were found in Peru, called the Paracas skulls. So, were they resistant to DNA testing? Not really. Their DNA was tested in 2014, and the results were stunning. These skulls are thousands of years old and have DNA only found in people in the Middle East. I'm sorry, but Peru is not in the Middle East, is it? No. And get this. The DNA from the largest skull has genetics that originated in Mesopotamia. They were real people. Yes, mainstream science doesn't think so. Mainstream science can go elsewhere. One of the researchers of the skulls, L.A. Marzulli, believes these skulls belonged to Nephilim hybrids. And it's interesting that people with Middle Eastern DNA were in the South American jungle thousands of years ago. Are they Nephilim? Anunnaki hybrids? I'll let you decide for yourself. Now, we know Sitchin was wrong about the planet Nibiru, but in 2015, Caltech researchers found evidence of a massive object deep in the solar system. It is a planet the size of Neptune, with an orbit so elliptical that it reaches out further than Pluto, just like Nibiru. There are no photos of it yet, but it is so massive that its gravity is affecting the orbits of objects in the Kuiper belt. Researchers say there is a 98% probability that this object is their Anunnaki. It has long been believed that the large brain of Homo sapiens is what makes us intelligent. But the Neanderthal brain was of similar size to ours. They were not simple cavemen. Neanderthals built families, societies, created art, music, and waged organized war. Yet Homo sapiens eventually wiped out the Neanderthals. Why? Neanderthals were incredibly strong, physically much stronger than humans, and they had the same sized brain. They should have destroyed us. Why didn't they? In 2013, Homo naledi was discovered. Homo naledi is an extinct species of archaic human. They had very small brains, only about a third of our size, yet they knew how to make stone tools. They performed funeral rites, which implies they had religion or some idea of the afterlife, which also implies they had language. They were very intelligent. So, if brain size doesn't indicate intelligence, what does? In 2020, a very interesting study was published by scientists at the Max Planck Institute of Cell Biology and Genetics. They identified a gene mutation that triggered the creation of faster neurons in the Homo sapiens brain. This gene is called TKTL1. Other hominids had this gene too, including Neanderthals, but all of them differed from the modern human gene by only a single amino acid. This tiny change would not have come from crossbreeding or thousands of years of evolution. The only time we see a single gene specifically altered like that is when that gene is targeted and manipulated by technology, by genetic engineering. By altering this single gene, Homo sapiens could develop neurons much faster than any other hominid. Much, much faster. For 300,000 years, Homo sapiens did not change much. They did not invent or innovate. In fact, Neanderthals were the dominant species on Earth until about 50,000 years ago. Then something happened. Humans suddenly began to be creative, to reason, and to invent. Within a few generations, Neanderthals were wiped out and Homo sapiens conquered the world, and our species has been advancing rapidly ever since. The TKTL1 gene, with just a tiny tweak, acted as a turbo switch in our minds and made us the humans we are today. Now, you may not believe in the Anunnaki, but you still have to wonder, who flipped that switch? They say it is coming, that it is out there, lurking beyond the edge of our solar system, awaiting its return. A wanderer planet, an invisible force, a cosmic time bomb set to reset civilization as we know it. For decades, the name Nibiru has hovered on the boundaries of history. It is whispered in ancient texts, forbidden studies, and modern doomsday prophecies. It is called the hidden planet, the destroyer, the home of the gods, the bringer of chaos and rebirth. Some believe it is the secret home world of the Anunnaki, the gods of Sumerian legend. Some say it is a myth, a distortion of ancient tales. Others assert it is real, and its return is inevitable. The official story? Nibiru does not exist. There is no wanderer planet, no hidden celestial body waiting to emerge from the darkness, no cosmic object with the power to reset civilization. NASA dismisses it as pseudoscience. Historians call it a misinterpretation, but here's the thing. Something truly exists. For centuries, cultures across the world have spoken of a wandering star, a cosmic force that brings about upheaval. The Sumerians called it Nibiru, a crossing point in the heavens, an object associated with the gods. In Egyptian texts, a cosmic force called the Destroyer appears at the end of cycles. In the Bible, a blazing star named Wormwood falls from the sky, poisoning water sources worldwide. In different ages, different civilizations left warnings of a cosmic force that brings the end and a new beginning. Today, astronomers suspect that an undiscovered planet might be hiding in the Kuiper Belt or beyond. There are orbital anomalies that hint at a huge invisible force. Some researchers believe a dark twin of our sun, a brown dwarf, might be the missing link in long extinction cycles. Nibiru, Planet X, the Destroyer. Do these names describe the same object? And what about Zecharia Sitchin, the man who brought Nibiru into modern consciousness? The man who claimed an undiscovered 12th planet existed beyond Pluto, following an extreme elliptical orbit, returning every 3,600 years. He argued that the Anunnaki, the gods of Sumerian legend, came from this planet, descended to Earth, and created mankind as a labor force. Mainstream historians call his work a fraud. His translations have been fiercely disputed. They say he got it all wrong. But if that's true, why does this story keep coming back? Why do so many myths, so many texts, so many unexplained astronomical mysteries seem to align with the idea of an unknown celestial body on the edge of our system? Perhaps Nibiru is not what we think. Maybe it's not a planet. Maybe it is something else, a force, a cycle, an event that has been erased from history. Tonight, we will dissect it all. The origins of the word Nibiru and the actual meaning of the Sumerian texts. The scientific basis behind the missing planets in our solar system. Nibiru's connection to ancient myths and religious prophecy. And whether it is possible that we are heading toward something inevitable. Because if the legends are true, Nibiru doesn't just exist, it's returning. Nibiru is an Akkadian word found in Mesopotamian texts written in cuneiform. It is derived from the root word aberu, which means to pass across or to cross over. The oldest known references to Nibiru come from Babylonian and Assyrian astronomical texts, not Sumerian sources, although it appears in texts influenced by Sumerian mythology. The earliest mentions of Nibiru date from the 2nd millennium BCE. The word is used repeatedly on different clay tablets, but its meaning changes depending on the context. But what does Nibiru actually mean in Akkadian? Nibiru is often translated as a crossing point, a place of transition, and a celestial body that crosses the sky, a celestial sign in the heavens. Sometimes Nibiru is used as an alternative name for Jupiter, and in Babylonian mythology, Nibiru is directly linked to Marduk, the son of Enki. Nibiru is a word used to denote a celestial object that is passing or crossing, not necessarily a single planet. Nibiru appears in several Mesopotamian texts, most notably in Babylonian astronomical records and mythology. Mappinu, Babylonian Star Catalog. The Mappinu is an ancient Babylonian star catalog that lists constellations, planetary movements, and celestial cycles. It specifically refers to Nibiru. The star that stands in the west at the end of the year and is seen in the east at the beginning of the year is Nibiru. This describes a celestial body that moves in a distinctive pattern, appearing in different parts of the sky at different times of the year. Nibiru standing in the west and then appearing in the east suggests something with a long, possibly elliptical orbital path. Enuma Elish, Babylonian creation epic. In the Enuma Elish, after defeating the chaos goddess Tiamat, the god Marduk is granted kingship and is responsible for organizing the cosmos. Marduk created stations for the great gods, the stars, their likeness, as the stars of the zodiac, he set up. He arranged the year and the intersections. He divided it for 12 months. He set up 3 stars. He set the station of Nibiru to determine their bounds, that none should go astray or come short. Here, Nibiru determines the boundaries of other planetary movements and is located at a crucial point in the solar system, a crossing point, or a cosmic landmark. Astrolabe B, in another Babylonian star catalog called Astrolabe B, it is described, "The red star standing in the south after the gods of the night have completed their task, dividing the sky in half. This star is Nibiru, Marduk." This suggests a red-colored celestial body, a large planet, star, or comet, with a reddish hue. In later texts, particularly from the Neo-Babylonian period, around 600 BCE, Nibiru is used as a name for Jupiter, Marduk's planet. One of the main counter-arguments is that Nibiru is just Jupiter. But if that's true, why do Babylonian astronomers sometimes differentiate between Nibiru and Jupiter? In some clay tablets, Nibiru is clearly used interchangeably with Jupiter. In others, Nibiru is described separately as a moving, crossing object. This suggests that Nibiru was something other than the usual planetary name. Was it a planetary object that only appeared during certain cycles? Was it a celestial event that was misinterpreted over time? Was it a planet with an extremely large elliptical orbit that only occasionally comes close? For centuries, the ancient gods ruled unchallenged. Enlil, lord of the earth. Anu, king of heaven. Their dominion was law, their hierarchy etched in stone. But in the shifting sands of time, power is never permanent. From the watery depths, a new name emerged, Marduk. He was the son of Enki, the god of wisdom and creation. But fate is not written by the past. It is forged in fire, war, and rebellion, and Marduk's time would come. The sky was in chaos. Primeval forces, Apsu and Tiamat, threatened to destroy the world. The old gods, powerless against them, turned to Marduk with an offer: defeat the chaos dragon, and the kingship is yours. And he did. Marduk arose as a warrior, using the wind as his weapon, weaving a net to trap his foe. He defeated Tiamat, splitting her body in two, and from what remained, he constructed the very structure of reality: the heavens, the earth, the celestial bodies, the stars, the sun, the moon. All were set by his hand, and for this, Marduk claimed his throne. The gods spoke his name. His name is Lugal Dimmer Ankia, king of the gods of heaven and earth. Whatever he commands, we will do. But the gods did not just rule in heaven, they shaped the world beneath. And so Marduk built his city, a reflection of his dominance. Babylon, the city of kings, the center of the world. Under Hammurabi, Babylon rose to power, and with it, the name of Marduk eclipsed all others. Enlil, once the supreme ruler, was pushed aside. Anu, the father of the gods, faded into the past. Where the people once prayed to many gods, now they worshipped one. The old gods had to acknowledge this transfer of power. Every god, Lamu and Lahamu, opened their mouths and said to the Igigi gods, "Before, Marduk was our beloved son. Now, he is your king. Hear his command." Thereupon, all of them cried out in unison, "His name is Lugal Dimmer Ankia. Trust in him." When they had bestowed the kingship upon Marduk, they blessed him to be prosperous and successful. Marduk said, "Above the Apsu, the emerald dwelling, which I built for you beneath the celestial zones whose floor I made firm, I will build a house to be my luxurious dwelling place. In it, I will establish my sanctuary. I will name it Babylon, the house of the great gods." This was a cosmic reorganization, not just theologically, but astronomically. So, what was the role of Nibiru in Marduk's new structure? As we saw in the Enuma Elish epic, Marduk set Nibiru as a landmark to ensure the other planets, the other gods, did not stray from their orbits. This is a profound concept. Nibiru is the cosmic control mechanism. If Nibiru is simply Jupiter, its role is important but not overly mysterious. But if Nibiru is an independent celestial body, a large planet or comet with an elliptical orbit, occasionally crossing the solar system, then its role becomes far more aligned with its etymological meaning, the crossing point. It is not one of the resident, long-term gods. It is an external controller. In the mythology, Marduk's rise replaces the old order, which was set by Enlil. The periodic return of Nibiru, Marduk's celestial body, may represent a periodic re-establishment of this order, a periodic cosmic force that ensures everything in heaven and on earth resets to the will of the new heavenly king. Let's return to the controversial claims of Zecharia Sitchin. He translated the Sumerian texts to say that they called Earth the seventh planet. Starting from the sun, there is Mercury, Venus, and then Earth. But they said no, the Earth is the seventh planet. And thinking about that truth, it also struck me that only someone coming from the outside in would call Earth the seventh planet, because Pluto would be planet 1, and so on. Mars would be the sixth, and Earth would be the seventh. Sitchin's hypothesis of a 12th planet following a 3,600-year orbit has been rejected by the scientific community. But his interpretation of the seventh planet poses a fascinating question about perspective. If the gods, Anunnaki, truly came from a planet further out than Pluto, or Planet X, counting from the outside in would be logical. Planet 7, Earth. In the context of the Marduk-Nibiru story of repositioning the cosmic order, the question of counting from the inside or the outside becomes critical. Did Mesopotamian civilization truly possess knowledge of a planetary system larger than what we acknowledge? It is time for us to look squarely at the science, the mysterious astronomical anomalies that cause modern scientists to question what the ancient gods already claimed. In the cold dark of the Kuiper Belt, where the light of the sun is a faint whisper, a question has haunted astronomers for over a century. What is pulling everything? Since Neptune was discovered in 1846 based on the orbital anomalies of Uranus, we have understood that gravity is the fingerprint of existence. A massive object does not need to be seen to prove its presence, and right now, that fingerprint is scattered across the edges of our solar system, pointing to something massive lurking. In 2016, scientists at Caltech published compelling evidence for a massive Planet X. The evidence did not come from a direct sighting, but from the strange clustering of distant minor objects known as KBOS, Kuiper Belt objects, and ETNOS, extreme trans-Neptunian objects. These objects all share anomalous orbital elements. Strange inclination. Their orbits are all tilted in the same direction, as if they are being pulled by a common gravitational force, unaligned with the orbital plane of the main planets. Clustering. They all bunch up closest to the Sun at a certain side of the solar system, a point called the perihelion. Scientists calculated the chance of this happening randomly is only 0.007%. This requires a dominant object, name, Planet X or Planet 9. Mass, approximately 5 to 10 times the mass of Earth. Orbit, extremely elliptical, circling the Sun every 20,000 years on average. Distance, about 300 to 1,000 times the Earth-Sun distance away from the Sun. This mysterious celestial body is large and extremely distant. It causes a gravitational stirring that we can measure, even if we cannot see it. So, is Planet X the Nibiru of the Sumerians? On a purely scientific basis, the answer is impossible. Sitchin said Nibiru returns every 3,600 years, a cycle far too short and too close to fit the 20,000-year orbit of Planet X. However, there is a curious coincidence. Both are gravitational rulers at the periphery, responsible for the order or chaos of other objects. Both are invisible forces that have been predicted only through their traces. The mystery is even deeper. Some astrophysicists hypothesize that the thing causing the great extinction cycles on Earth, the periodic wipeouts of life, about every 27 million years, might be a dark companion to our Sun, an object called Nemesis, or a brown dwarf. A brown dwarf is neither a planet nor a star. They are massive objects that failed to ignite nuclear fusion, but they are still warm and massive, often 13 to 80 times the mass of Jupiter. If our Sun has a dark sibling, it would have an extremely long, wide orbit, as it passes through the massive Oort cloud on the edge of the solar system. Gravitational stirring. Its gravity would stir up the icy comets and asteroids. Comet shower. This stirring would push thousands of objects into the inner solar system, causing a shower of comets to impact Earth. This fits very well with geological records of recurrent extinction cycles. If we look at the legend again, we see phrases describing something red and fiery. Astrolabe B, the red star standing in the south. This star is Nibiru. The Bible, a blazing star called Wormwood Falls. Brown dwarfs, while dark, emit infrared light and often have a deep red or magenta appearance when observed with specialized telescopes. Could Babylonian astronomers, with their surprisingly advanced astronomical knowledge, have observed the passing of such a dark, massive, and reddish object? Historians say these stories are mythology. Scientists say Planet X exists, but it is not Nibiru. Yet the core idea of the wandering culture persists. A periodic cosmic force passes through the solar system, causing chaos and rebirth on Earth. In our understanding of history, we always assume destruction comes from within. War, pestilence, societal collapse. But what if the ancients knew of a destroyer from the outside? A cosmic cycle etched into the heavens. Are the Babylonian texts recording a real impact event of the distant past? A planetary collision that was mythologized into the story of Marduk splitting Tiamat? These clay tablets are not just stories. They are observation records written by astronomers who monitored the sky for thousands of years. What they called Nibiru may be scientific truth that we are only beginning to re-understand. Undeniable evidence of a large, undiscovered celestial body regulating or threatening our order. We've traced Nibiru from a Babylonian astronomical crossing point to an uncharted scientific hypothesis of Planet X. But this mystery extends beyond clay tablets and telescopes. It permeates deep into religious prophecy and global mythology, warnings of a cosmic conclusion that comes from the sky. If Nibiru is not a single planet, but a cyclical event, then it must leave a trace in humanity's collective memory. Perhaps the most potent link between Nibiru and doomsday prophecy lies in the biblical book of Revelation, a text foretelling the end of the age. In Revelation 8:10-11, a catastrophic celestial body appears after the third trumpet sounds. And the third angel sounded, and there fell a great star from heaven, burning as it were a torch, and it fell upon the third part of the rivers, and upon the fountains of waters, and the name of the star is called Wormwood, and the third part of the waters became wormwood, and many men died of the waters, because they were made bitter. Burning as it were a torch describes a fiery object, perhaps a large comet or planet entering the atmosphere. Wormwood, an extremely bitter plant, a synonym for poison and bitterness. Poisoning the waters describes a catastrophic geological consequence, possibly from meteoritic debris causing contamination. This parallel is remarkable. Nibiru is described by Babylonian texts as a red star, and a crossing point associated with the re-establishment of order Wormwood is a passing celestial body, causing global chaos and death related to water. Both herald a major shift or the end of an era. A crucial question remains. If Nibiru is real, why is it so difficult to detect? Modern scientists believe Planet X, Planet 9, if it exists, is hard to find because extreme distance. It is so far away, making the sunlight reaching it extremely faint. Color and light. Being a cold gas/ice giant, it absorbs most sunlight rather than reflecting it, making it nearly invisible to optical telescopes. This aligns with the description of a hidden planet, or invisible force, that is only recognizable through its gravitational impact. And if we return to Sitchin's 3,600-year cycle, though rejected by modern science, it evokes the idea of periodicity. Perhaps ancient civilizations did not record a fixed planet, but a great cycle of astronomical chaos marked by the passage of this large object, whether a brown dwarf, Planet X, or a huge comet. Their understanding of Nibiru may be a coded historical warning. Beware the crossing point in the sky, for its return brings the end of the old order and the beginning of the new. So what is Nibiru? According to Sumer, Babylon, it is a celestial crossing point and the symbol of Marduk, the god who reorganized the cosmos. According to Sitchin, it is the home planet of the Anunnaki, with a 3,600-year cycle, who created man. According to modern science, it may be a misinterpretation of Jupiter, or it could be a reference to an undiscovered gravitational object like Planet X or a brown dwarf. Whatever the physical truth is, the legacy of Nibiru persists. It is a cautionary tale woven through cultures, challenging our understanding of our cosmic history. If the legends of Nibiru are true, not in detail, but in spirit, then we live in an incomplete solar system, one that is always under threat from a gravitational force we have yet to pinpoint. And if the ancient astronomers were right to see it as an object that divides the sky and determines bounds, then it means an external controlling force is watching us, awaiting its return. Nibiru is not just a myth. It is a persistent echo in the human memory of an event that changed this planet. And if scientists continue to refine the distant orbital models, and if they find irrefutable evidence of a massive object lurking in the dark, then we will have to confront the horrifying possibility that what the ancient gods claimed was not mythology, but erased history, and that history is returning. For millennia, mankind has looked up at the night sky, counting the stars and planets. Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars. A familiar rotation, an established order. But there is a story buried in the oldest clay tablets of the Sumerian civilization that told of a different order, an order that once existed. The Sumerians, astronomers without telescopes, without computers, described a 12th member of our cosmic family. They called it Nibiru. Nibiru. The name itself means the planet of the crossing. Its symbol? The cross itself. A symbol we often mistake for an invention only 2,000 years old, but its origin, according to the Sumerians, dates back 6,000 years. The story they told was that of a cosmic invader. Nibiru originally did not belong to the solar system. It was a wandering object, pulled in by the enormous gravitational force of the outer planets as it swept past. And then, disaster struck. Nibiru collided with an older planet, which the Sumerians called Tiamat. Tiamat was split in half. One half was shattered into countless fragments, and perhaps became the asteroid belt and the comets we see today. The other half, a planet half remained intact, pushed into a new orbit. That is the Earth we live on. The person who brought this incredible story from forgotten clay tablets into the modern light was Zecharia Sitchin, born on July 11, 1920, in Baku, Azerbaijan. Sitchin's life was shaped by deep exposure to multiple languages and cultures, from Palestine, where he was educated in biblical research and Semitic languages, to the University of London, where he studied economics and history. This experience fostered an independent researcher with a unique perspective. After working as a journalist and editor in Israel, Sitchin moved to the U.S. and dedicated the rest of his life to research. He self-proclaimed to retranslate ancient Sumerian, Akkadian, and Babylonian texts, arguing that the traditional explanations of mainstream academia were flawed, or even a deliberate concealment of the truth. Lacking formal degrees in linguistics or archaeology, his claims faced harsh criticism. However, that didn't stop him from publishing The 12th Planet in 1976, laying the foundation for his entire Anunnaki Theory. Sitchin's theory revolves around these core ideas. First, the Anunnaki were not mythology, but flesh and blood extraterrestrials who once visited Earth. Second, Sumerian texts describe the Anunnaki creating mankind through genetic engineering. Third, the mysterious 12th planet, Nibiru, was the Anunnaki's homeworld. Fourth, ancient civilizations did not develop spontaneously, but were directly influenced by the Anunnaki. Despite academia rejecting his translations, Sitchin spent decades arguing that traditional scholars were either wrong or covering up the truth about our origins. His most famous assertion was the existence of a 12th planet in the solar system, a planet that modern science does not acknowledge. Sitchin believed the Sumerians possessed irrationally advanced astronomical knowledge, which could not have been obtained without modern telescopes. And central to that knowledge was Nibiru, a planet with a long elliptical orbit that lasted 3,600 years around the Sun. Nibiru was the home of the Anunnaki, and every 3,600 years it would come close enough to Earth for them to interact with humanity. But how did Sitchin arrive at the precise number, 3,600 years? He found it buried in the oldest mathematical system, ancient chronologies, and celestial records left by the Sumerians and Babylonians, a sexagesimal system. In the sexagesimal system, or base 60 counting system, the Sumerians used a unit of time called the shar. Shar. This unit was not just a number, it was a cosmic cycle, equivalent to exactly 3,600 years. The shar was part of a repeating cycle, alongside the nere, 600 years, and the sao, 60 years. To the ancients, these weren't just numbers. They were cosmic time markers, used to track the movements of celestial bodies and, more importantly, the dynasties of the gods. Next, Zecharia Sitchin turned his attention to the Sumerian king list, a document that records the reigns of early rulers. Some reigns in this list span tens of thousands of years. These numbers were so incredible that scholars dismissed them as pure mythology. But Sitchin asked, did these kings really reign for thousands of years? Or were these records tracking something else, something that arrived at those regular intervals? He noticed that these huge reigns often occurred in multiples of 3,600 years. Sitchin further delved into ancient star catalogs, where Nibiru was described as a crossing point in the sky, an astronomical marker used to determine the movements of other planets. Some texts even described it as a red celestial body that influenced other planets. To Sitchin, this was not a fixed point. It was a moving object, and if it moved, it had an orbit. He connected the 3,600-year cycle of the Shar with the idea of a celestial body that vanishes from sight, only to return. After these long intervals, he believed the texts were not describing normal planetary motion, but an extreme elliptical orbit that only brought it close to Earth every 3,600 years. The return of Nibiru, Sitchin claimed, would cause great chaos, possibly related to the great flood legends and future disasters. However, despite heavy criticism, Sitchin was right about some things. The Sumerians were indeed far more advanced than mainstream history admits, and biblical stories can be traced back to older Sumerian mythologies. Furthermore, anomalies in our solar system may indicate the absence of planets. For centuries, astronomers believed they had mapped the solar system completely, but the deeper they looked, the more discrepancies they found: celestial bodies drifting, orbits bent for no apparent reason, objects behaving as if something massive, invisible, was pulling them. Initially, these anomalies were dismissed. Calculation errors, instrument glitches, nothing more than cosmic noise. But the evidence piled up. Some called it Planet X, a missing world beyond our reach. Others called it Nemesis, a dark twin of the sun, a force lurking in the distant void. The search for a hidden planet is not a modern idea. It began in the 19th century. In 1846, Neptune was discovered, not because they saw it, but because something was pulling the orbit of Uranus. Scientists calculated its position mathematically before they even saw it. But even after Neptune was found, something was still wrong. There were still gravitational anomalies. Something beyond Neptune seemed to be influencing it. By the late 1800s, astronomers began calling it Planet X, a mysterious world somewhere in the dark. Then came Pluto. It was found in 1930, right where astronomers expected, but there was a problem. It was too small. Pluto did not have enough mass to influence Neptune's orbit. That meant the real Planet X was still out there. In 1992, astronomers discovered the Kuiper Belt, a vast region filled with icy objects beyond Neptune. This discovery proved that our solar system extends much further than Pluto. But at about 50 astronomical units from the Sun, something strange happens. The Kuiper Belt suddenly stops. There is a sudden drop in the number of objects. This is called the Kuiper Cliff, and no one knows exactly why it exists. One hypothesis was put forward. A giant hidden planet is acting as a cosmic wall, either sweeping away debris or pulling objects out of their natural positions. Then there's the issue of gravity. Some objects in the Kuiper Belt do not behave as they should. Their orbits are being bent by something unseen. Their paths suggest the influence of a huge gravitational force. And once again, the evidence pointed to a lost planet. In 2016, two astronomers at Caltech, Konstantin Batygin and Mike Brown, made a major announcement. They were no longer just speculating about a hidden planet. They had found mathematical evidence that a massive object was pulling the objects beyond Neptune. They called it Planet 9. According to their study, Planet 9 could be 5 to 10 times the size of Earth. It follows an extremely long elliptical orbit, located further out than Pluto. It takes 10,000 to 20,000 years to complete one orbit around the Sun. It pulls the trans-Neptunian objects, aligning them in unnatural ways. In other words, something massive is out there, and it is influencing everything around it. But there is one problem. We still haven't seen it. If Planet 9 exists, it is too far and too cold to reflect much sunlight. It may be Neptune-sized, but in effect it is invisible to current telescopes. Nevertheless, its influence is real. The math proves it, and astronomers are still looking. But not everyone believes we are looking for a planet. Some think we are missing something much bigger. Some researchers propose that the Sun has a dark twin, a brown dwarf or red dwarf orbiting far beyond Pluto. This companion would have a highly elliptical orbit, only sweeping close to the Sun every few thousand years. If true, it could cause periodic mass extinction events on Earth by perturbing comets in the Oort cloud and pushing them toward the inner solar system. Other researchers suggest a Jupiter-sized planet called Tyche, located beyond the Kuiper belt. If Tyche exists, it would be too cold and dark to be easily detected, but still large enough to influence other celestial bodies. Both these hypotheses suggest that something larger than a planet is lurking on the edge of the solar system. One of the biggest anomalies is Sedna, a dwarf planet with an extremely long orbit. Unlike other trans-Neptunian objects, Sedna never comes close enough to the Sun to be influenced by normal planetary forces. Its orbit suggests it is being pulled by something far more distant, something we haven't found. Sedna, with its perihelion so distant that it cannot be explained by any known gravitational force in our system, is the most vivid physical evidence. Clearly, there is an unseen dominant force at the edge of the solar system, bending the rules we once believed to be immutable. Is this controller the cold Planet 9, a nemesis brown dwarf, or the Nibiru of Zecharia Sitchin? Ultimately, the question remains, is Nibiru real? Or did Sitchin misinterpret the allegorical texts of the Sumerians? Academia remains steadfast in its rejection of his theory, insisting that there is no evidence of such a planet with a 3,600-year orbit, but his supporters argue that NASA and major organizations are deliberately concealing its existence. Was Sitchin a prophet, or just a transmitter of mythology? Despite heavy criticism, his legacy has highlighted the anomalies in history and astronomy. One of the biggest conspiracy theories surrounding Zecharia Sitchin is his connection to secret societies such as Freemasonry or mystical organizations. Although there is no direct evidence that he was an active member of the Freemasons, some point to the mystical symbols and themes in his books. He often referred to secret knowledge and elite bloodlines, common themes in Masonic teachings. His focus on ancient gods as literal entities also echoes elements of theosophy, Gnostic mysticism, and Hermetic doctrines. Was Sitchin just a lone scholar who accidentally unearthed forgotten secrets? Or was he chosen to reveal a partial truth, orchestrated by some powerful organization? This makes us ponder the true meaning of myths. Are they merely fictional stories, or are they encoded historical records? Did the Sumerians truly witness a cosmic disaster and try to record it in religious language, turning a planet into a deity? Whether you believe in alien giants or simply the mathematics of Planet 9, one truth is undeniable. Our solar system is incomplete. On the icy edge of understanding, there is an invisible pull, a gravitational void waiting to be filled. It could be a new Planet X, a hidden celestial body, or the very Nibiru on its 3,600-year journey back. In 1972, The Pioneer 10 probe left our planet. It was followed by Pioneer 11 in 1973. Both were designed to be messengers crossing the boundary of the solar system, carrying the messages of humanity into the darkness of deep space. But as they journeyed into the void, something unexpected happened. An anomaly. These titanic machines, which had passed Jupiter and Saturn, began to decelerate inexplicably. A small, persistent pull, like an invisible hand reaching out from the darkness, was slowing their journey. The force was tiny, but it was undeniable. Scientists checked everything: solar radiation pressure, gas leaks, antenna misalignment. Every theory failed. This was the Pioneer anomaly, a mysterious wrinkle in the fabric of space physics. Was an unknown gravitational force acting on them, something outside our models? It was a first whisper from the unknown. This anomaly was not alone. Further out, enveloping our solar system like a giant icy shell, is the Oort cloud, a pristine reservoir of trillions of icy objects, believed to be the home of comets. And even there, we see signs of chaos. Certain regions of the Oort cloud show irregular movements, distorted orbits. It's as if something with immense gravity is tugging at them, an invisible giant lurking beyond the observable edge of our system. These perturbations do not fit the gravitational influence of known planets, nor do they fit normal comets or meteoroids. They are evidence of a missing piece. A massive object, hidden further than Pluto, is shaping the solar system in ways we are only beginning to recognize. Modern science has built a solid case for an undiscovered planet on the outer edge. The signs are all there. Computer simulations show that to explain the anomalous clustering orbits of certain distant objects, called TNOS, a massive, cold, 10 Earth mass world wandering in the dark is required. We call it Planet 9 or Planet X, but the idea of a hidden world at the edge of our system is not new. Among the older hypotheses, one name resonates with particular intensity: Nibiru. The researcher Zecharia Sitchin claimed this planet had a 3,600-year orbit, a detail that doesn't quite align with modern estimates for Planet 9's orbit. He believed it was inhabited, while current astronomy suggests it is an icy, solitary, cold world. However, the core idea remains intact. A massive object, a world, exists beyond the edge of our perception. Whether we call it Nibiru, Planet 9, or another name, one truth is becoming harder to ignore. A hidden celestial body is shaping the outer solar system invisible, but undeniable. And when we finally find it, the implications it carries could change everything. If there is a world lurking out there, has it ever come closer? Has the history of Earth ever been changed by the visit of a cosmic wanderer? To answer, we must turn our gaze from the telescope to humanity's most mysterious books. Among the ancient texts discovered, perhaps few are as controversial and mysterious as the Kolbrin Bible. It is not a Bible in the traditional sense, but a collection of manuscripts purported to combine Egyptian and Celtic records chronicling a great cosmic catastrophe. It claims to describe a red celestial body that appears cyclically, bringing destruction to Earth. The Kolbrin Bible is divided into two main sections: the Egyptian texts and the Celtic texts. The Egyptian texts are believed to have been compiled by Egyptian priests who survived a great deluge, possibly around 1500 BCE. They contain vivid descriptions of cataclysmic events. The Celtic texts, believed to have been recorded by early Anglican monks, contain spiritual teachings and chilling warnings of future cosmic disasters. This book remained hidden until the 20th century, reportedly found in Scotland and later appearing in New Zealand in the 1990s. Regardless of the authenticity of its origins, its words are a frightening warning. The Egyptian passages describe a massive celestial body appearing in the sky, called the Destroyer. And then, with the dawn, men saw a terrifying sight. The Destroyer rode upon a great rolling black cloud newly released from the bounds of the sky vaults, and it raged angrily across the sky, for it was the day of the Lord's wrath. This celestial body is said to have caused firestorms and earthquakes, great floods and rising seas, plagues, and the collapse of the environment. Another passage describes the celestial chaos in greater detail. Stars and the moon were moved from their places, rivers changed their course, and great smoke and fire erupted. The whole land was plunged into the dust of destruction. These descriptions do not resemble ordinary mythological tales. They are meticulous accounts of physical phenomena, the displacement of planets, volcanic activity, and a celestial body appearing suddenly. Is this destroyer a wandering planet, a giant comet, or a periodic cosmic event that the Egyptians witnessed and recorded, not in the language of science, but in the language of horror and reverence? Is it evidence of the reappearance of what we call Planet 9, or Nibiru, thousands of years ago, bringing destruction to civilization? If the Colburn Bible is a warning, it is telling us that power doesn't always protect. Sometimes it simply incinerates. In ancient Egypt, the sun god Ra was not only the giver of life, he was also the wielder of destruction. When his authority was challenged, when chaos threatened to dissolve the world, Ra did not merely strike back. He unleashed something far worse. The Eye of Ra was not a single entity. It was a force, an instrument of divine retribution, a weapon forged in cosmic fire. It was sent to cleanse, to punish, to re-establish balance through total annihilation. It could take many forms. Sometimes it was Sekhmet, the lion-headed goddess who massacred mortals in an unending rage. Other times it was Hathor, descending not as the nurturer, but as the harbinger of destruction. In every form, it served the same purpose, to burn away the world's corruption before order could be restored. When the Eye of Ra descended, it did not come in silence. The sky caught fire. Fire rained down, scorching the ground, turning rivers to steam. People fled in terror, but there was no escape. Death moved swiftly, relentless in its purpose. And when the destruction was complete, when the world had been purged, only then did the Eye withdraw, its hunger satisfied, for a time. These myths speak of a divine force, a celestial presence descending from the heavens, bringing fire, death, and purification. But are these merely legends? Were the Egyptians recording something they actually witnessed? A celestial disaster? A cosmic reset? A force that comes and goes? Now let's consider what happens if these legends are a memory of a physical event. If a celestial body, a wandering planet, a failed star, a cosmic traveler, passes close to Earth, it doesn't need to collide to cause devastation. Gravity doesn't ask permission. Its pull would reach across space, shifting tides, displacing continents, disrupting the fragile balance of our world. We would feel its presence long before it arrives. The moon's orbit would begin to drift. The ocean tides would swell in ways no scientist could explain. Our electromagnetic field would flicker, plunging the planet into a frenzy of geomagnetic storms, crippling satellites, blacking out cities. The sky itself would become strange, clouds forming in unfamiliar patterns, the sunlight dimming or burning too brightly. Then the ground would shake, not from impact, but from the invisible hand of gravity pulling hard on the Earth's crust, cracking open fault lines, igniting the molten rage beneath us. As the celestial intervention peaks, Dormant volcanoes will awaken, spewing ash high into the sky, choking out the sun, plunging the world into a prolonged volcanic winter. The Yellowstone supervolcano, one of the most dangerous volcanic systems on Earth, could erupt with a force unseen in tens of thousands of years, burying continents under thick layers of ash, suffocating entire civilizations. Storms will rage, continent-sized hurricanes, winds that tear the ground, reshaping coastlines in mere hours. The sky itself might catch fire, streaked by debris from a chaotic solar system. Tsunamis will rise like liquid mountains, sweeping miles inland, submerging entire cities, dragging humanity into the deep. And even as the celestial intruder moves away, Earth will not simply return to normal. The scars will remain. The atmosphere may be stripped away, leaving a dying world. The planet's tilt could shift, plunging us into an ice age or a fire age, with days and nights unlike anything we've ever known. And if its passage stirs the outer asteroid belt beyond Neptune, it will send a storm of cosmic debris hurtling towards us, a final, fatal blow many years after the sky has burned out. Throughout history, civilizations have watched the sky looking for signs. They recorded cycles of destruction, fire from the heavens, floods that reshaped the world. They whispered of a celestial force that comes and goes, unseen until it is too late. The Egyptians called it the Destroyer, a fiery entity that brought plague, earthquake, and the storm of death. They spoke of Sekhmet's wrath, Apep's unending hunger, the eye of Ra descending to purge the world. The Kolbrin Bible describes a red celestial body appearing suddenly, turning rivers to blood and throwing the stars from their places. Revelation speaks of wormwood, a blazing star falling from heaven, poisoning the waters, bringing suffering. Sitchin looked at these stories and saw a pattern, a planet that returns cyclically, a hidden force on the edge of the solar system, waiting for its time. And now, modern astronomy has begun to suspect that perhaps he was right. A missing planet, a force that warps the orbits of distant worlds. A dark mass at the furthest edges of our system is waiting. If the ancients recorded what they saw, if the myths are memories of something real, then we are not just telling stories of the past. We are reading warnings of the future, because if it came once, it will come again.